Maverick. Noun, unusual person. A visionary, leader, go-getter, an independent thinker. They see the vision for their life and pull that future towards them with an unyielding belief that things can and must be better. They achieve what most won't. Innovative, influential, daring, and direct, with a remarkably high tolerance for taking calculated risk. A foe to the status quo. This is Passive Real Estate Investing with Mavericks. Your host, Neil Timmins, has been involved with over $300 million in real estate transactions. He's a published author, commercial property investor, and real estate syndicator. This show is for those who want to learn how to earn passive income through real estate investing. Now, here's your host, Neil Timmins.
Welcome to Passive Real Estate Investing with Mavericks, where we provide actionable steps for you to grow your passive income and become job optional. During this episode, you're going to discover how to get your investment money to pay you twice. For those of you who are new, I'm your host, Neil Timmins. I love passive income from real estate. Before I introduce you to today's Maverick, I want to make a request that at any point you like what you hear, well, give us a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. And if you love what you hear, well, give us a written review. Plus, be certain to take a look at the description of this episode. We packed it with thousands of dollars in free resources. So today, we've got the privilege to learn from a person who describes himself as the anti-financial advisor. Well, prior to his career in anti-financial advice, he was an actual financial advisor. He's got an interesting story. He'll tell you all about it. It all changed when he ultimately discovered a new path, really what the wealthy do. I would describe today's Maverick as somebody who's absolutely passionate about producing passive income. I want to introduce you to today's Maverick. I've got Chris Miles here with me. Chris, how are you?
Man, it's so good to be here, Neil.
It's good to see you, man. We saw each other a couple weeks ago down in Tampa. It's good to see you here digitally. So I'm excited we got connected because today's going to be a fun conversation. Let's do this for the audience's sake. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do?
Yeah, so I'm Chris Miles, cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor, right? So what I do is I basically do the opposite of what financial advisors teach you to do, which is instead of saving forever, how do you actually get money working for you today so you become work optional, right? So you have enough passive income, essentially doing what Robert Kiyosaki talks about in his books, but never teaches you what to do. That's what we do.
All right, cool. Well, that sounds sexy. So I want to get into the meat. Like, how does one actually do that? But maybe before that, how did you start? How did you even end up in the business that you're in today?
Yeah, not the way I planned. It's interesting because I was raised by two really hardworking parents, taught me great values. But the one thing they didn't really teach me much about was money, right? Other than the scarcity of it. So, you hear phrases growing up, and maybe you did too, Neil, phrases like, hey, we can't afford this. What do you think money does? Grow on trees?
Yep.
What do you think I am, made of money? Come on, that kind of stuff. I would hear that all the time growing up. Even my dad would talk about his job and say, Chris, I'm going to work until I'm dead. Like, this job will probably kill me. And especially on those really stressful days. And I vowed never to be like that, right? I never wanted that kind of life. So I was the first in my family to go to college. And of course, like all people committed to going to college, the senior year, right before I was going to graduate, I decided to take a hiatus and drop out because my goal is to become a business consultant. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be a business consultant, have my own consulting business and everything, shouldn't I have real life business experience, not just get an MBA and that kind of stuff? So I took a little sabbatical from college right before I got my bachelor's. And I said, all right, I should probably find a business to do over the next year and see what I can make work here. Well, nothing really quite hit me until I had a friend who was a financial advisor, just barely got hired onto a firm. It sounded interesting, so I asked for an interview. I didn't realize they took anybody that could basically pass a test with 70% and has a heartbeat and no criminal record.
Sure.
I didn't realize it was that easy to get in and be a financial advisor because I didn't have a lot of financial background or anything. But I got in, and I actually liked being an entrepreneur so much that I actually dropped out of college, never went back. Despite some of my in-laws, desperate requests for me to go back to college and get that sociology degree that I so needed, right?
Yeah, right.
So anyways, so I ended up doing that for several years. And then several years in, my dad then called me up and said, Chris, I need you to basically help be my financial advisor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sat down with my dad, and understand that my dad was like the ultimate tightwad. You look up cheap in the dictionary, there's my dad's picture right there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, total tightwad. I think he's the kind of guy that Dave Ramsey would have modeled after. Like Dave Ramsey would be like, I want to be like him when I grow up. You know?
That's my guy.
That's my guy, right? And that was my dad. Like he saved everything. He didn't want to spend money. I mean, he spent on some other things, but here and there. But he basically was like very cheap, always talking about how he couldn't afford things, and he even paid off his house early. He was so proud of that. So he was debt free, saved up in his 401ks. And I sit down, look at his numbers, and I say, Dad, I'm going to be honest with you. If you don't have Social Security, you better hope you die in 5 years, because that's how much money you have now saved up. And of course, he's saying, well, that's not what I want to hear. What are some solutions? I said, I don't know. You did everything right. Everything that I teach as a financial advisor, you did right. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what to do. And of course, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. It was just a few weeks later that one of my friends, who's actually left being a financial advisor to go do real estate investing, they started telling me how much money he's making in real estate as he's flipping properties and stuff.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh, come on, that's too good to be true. There's no way that you and your dad are making, the same cash flow or the same income that he's making as a professor at that college. There's no way. And he's like, it's true. And so he asked me two key questions. He said, Chris, how many of your clients are actually financially free where they don't worry about money? And as I thought about that, I said, well, okay, I've got some retired physicians, but no, they still worry about running out of money. Okay, how about this? How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning from the assets under management, but actually doing these mutual fund investments? None, because I think I know guys have been here since the late 70s and they're still not able to retire. So there's your problem. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of led me down the path. I started learning more about really how passive income works, to the point where I dropped out. I completely quit being a financial advisor at the height of my career. I had this integrity crisis, right? I was like, do I stay in that career and teach something I know has not worked for people? It's been proven not to work, and just get paid, or do I leave it and do something else? So I chose the latter. I ended up being a mortgage broker. I was even teaching ballroom dancing on the side a little bit, because I was one of the nation's top amateur ballroom dancers in the early 2000s.
Okay.
And weird known fact. And then, and while I was doing that, I was starting to learn about real estate investing and everything else and passive income. And I focused on that so that later that year, when I was 28, almost 29 years old, I was able to become financially independent. And that's, after a while, of course, everybody, when you retire at 28, everybody wants to know how you did it.
Yep.
And I love being a teacher. That's why I liked, doing ballroom dancing instruction and things like that. So I eventually in 2007 came out of the retirement mode and started coaching people. And that's kind of what I've been doing ever since.
Yeah. You show people how and how to ultimately become financially free, and really how to get more passive income, how to use the tools that are out there that, I mean, it's fair to say the average don't operate like the rich operate. Mm-hmm. The wealthy in this country do things differently. And that's ultimately, you take different actions and you end up with different outcomes.
Yes, exactly.
That's true in all of life.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
if you want mediocrity, if you want ordinary, just do what ordinary people do, right? If you want extraordinary, you got to do something extraordinary, right? You got to do something that's outside of that. And I kind of love, Seinfeld. If you ever watched the TV show Seinfeld, there's that episode of Opposite George. For one episode, George becomes a winner, even gets his dream job with the New York Yankees. And the way he did it is because what Jerry told him. He said, George, if everything you thought, basically if every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would be right. Right. And that's true. Like anything you hear in the media, anything you hear from financial advisors, if you just did the opposite of what they do, you'll end up being better off. And I'm not saying you go blow your money in Vegas. I'm not saying that, right? But it's true. It's like you want to follow people that actually have done what the minority like us have done, which is, we've become financially independent. We've gotten out of that rat race. We've actually become financially free, and we do it much earlier than age 65, right? Sure. And the truth is, what I'm seeing right now, and you're going to hear more and more articles about this. I already saw one recently about 401k balances. The 401k millionaires are declining. There's now less than 300,000 401k millionaires, meaning that people have at least $1 million in 401k. Remember, in traditional financial advising, you're only supposed to live on 3%, not 4%. That's like old. We had disproved that like 20 years ago. 3%. So if you have $1 million in 401k, 3% is $30,000 a year. you're a broke, impoverished millionaire, right? Like you're living below the poverty line as a millionaire. That's just wrong. And there's now less than 300,000 people out of over 300 million people in this country that actually have that much.
Right.
So you do that. You start to kind of put 2 + 2 together, realize, wait a minute, 401ks have actually been around for the average Joe since 1985, almost 40 years. And they've been selling us this 30 or 40-year retirement plan forever. I'm sure there's more than 300,000 people that started with a 401k plan in the 80s, right? So that's what we're seeing right now, is that there are people that really are not becoming financially free and they don't know the difference. And the sad thing is that their financial advisor will likely be retired off of all the commissions they've been earning while they're not.
All right, pull back the steel curtain. Let's get me into the weeds. I want to know what actions in specifics should one be taking? How did you get there? All right. What does one have to do in order to end up with a similar outcome to where you're at? And then, separate question is what are folks, there's multiple paths to end up in a very similar spot. And so, what are some options out there that people should consider?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of already hit the one, and I know your listeners already know about passive income and how that's so important because, getting that mindset out of the accumulation mindset into a passive income mindset, focus on the income and what actually comes in, that's important. But the second point I would say is that get your money out of prison. The problem with the traditional financial world is they're telling you to lock your money up in prison. Lock it up in 401ks, lock it up in IRAs, right? So if you try to touch your own money, you get slapped with a 10% penalty. It's like being a teenager again, asking your parents for the car keys, right? It's like, can I drive my own car? No, you can't. Slap, That's what it's like having a stupid 401k or IRA, right? You get a slap 10% penalty if you try to tap into it before you're 59 and a half. You also have issues with, home equity. Everybody tells you to pay off your house and pay it down really fast. I made that mistake during the last recession. Like I thought for sure, because of the way the mortgage market was, and I was a mortgage broker, I thought for sure, if I ever need to get money out, I just get a line of credit. That should be easy. And then 2007, 2008 hit, and they lock up all that equity, and then we start seeing values tank. I saw all that equity in my house disappear. It wasn't overnight, but over a year, right? Mm-hmm. It got to the point where I was upside down in a property that had hundreds of thousands of equity trapped in it. I would have been much better off keeping that money in my own control. And so I really recommend people focus on getting their money back in their own control, right? Get that money out of those kind of stupid government plans that I don't trust the government anyways. Get out of those places, get in your own power. Even if it's a simple savings account, you could do that. Or we talk about like infinite banking and stuff when we do that too. Or, home equity, same thing. Like get out of into your control, use it for leverage. Once you have that, then it's just a matter of where you deploy it, right? Where do you put that money? For example, I've had many people ask lately, especially with trying to cash out equity for mortgages. We're not as bullish on that right now because of the interest rates, but in the right conditions, it makes sense. We have one client right now where we found out that her money was all locked up. It was stuck in her company's 401k. She can't get to it unless she gets fired or quits, which is not going to happen anytime soon. So she had virtually nothing to invest. What we did find though, she had equity in her property. We had about 160,000 in there. And I said, listen, let's do a cash out refinance because she was already trying to aggressively pay off her home in about 10 years. I said, let's make it a 30-year mortgage, which is going to freak you out, but we're going to stretch it out, get a cash out of 160,000, and the payment will only be $400 more a month. Now, if we can take the 160,000, even when we make a 10% rate of return, guess what? Now we're making a net of roughly about, 10, 11,000 or so a year off of that money. No money out of pocket, but they're able to make that spread. Places we were looking at with her specifically. Now, she's a non-accredited investor in her case, so there's not as many options. So turnkey real estate rentals is an option, right? Be able to buy those properties. Now, you have to be picky because a lot of turnkey companies right now are struggling because of their current rates and the rent ratios that they're not really that profitable right now. And so you really want high cash-on-cash returning properties. And there's still some out there. Luckily, we have like a network of about 6 different turnkey providers that we can choose from. So we have about 2 or 3 right now that actually have good numbers, where the other ones not so much currently. So that's one option. There's funds. There's different types of funds. People do lending funds, right? Where you might lend your money to somebody and it's like at 10%. It could be short-term lending. It could be even just a lending fund where it's just diversified in a whole bunch of things. Syndications are another thing we're talking with her about as well. Do we put in a specific project, whether it's apartments, self-storage even, which I think self-storage is got some really good potential for 2023. Even like oil and gas. Oil and gas, another place that a lot of our clients are looking at right now, kind of frothing because oil prices are predicted to keep going up, especially with what's going on right now. Biden tried to drive it down for just in time for re-election for all the Democrats in office, right? And now we're starting to see those gas prices creep back up on us again. So if I'm going to have to pay more at the gas pump, we might as well get paid more on my investment too, where I can actually double dip, get paid on the land, and I get paid on the royalties of that oil and gas investment. Even partnerships. There's even things in the business space or even in real estate business space where like my number one investment right now is one with raw land, where I'm doing a partnership where they're doing all the flipping of the raw land, seller financing, but I'm financing it and getting paid great returns off that, getting paid like I'm the bank. And so there's just so many options that can happen. If you're a accredited investor, obviously so many more that you can do, but when you realize how big this world really is, right? How many options there are. Even just in my own network alone, there's over 20 different people, operators in that. And then they have all their own options too. You start to realize you don't need mutual funds. In fact, you start looking at mutual funds at like a joke because you're like, wow, the S&P 500 in the last 30 years has averaged about 7.6%. In 30 years, 7.6. That's high risk, mediocre returns, where most of these things we can find at least a good 10% plus average, and it's actual cash flow. So I'll give you an example. Another one of my clients, he's living in California, had $1 million retirement plan. And he said, Chris, I don't want to live on $30,000 a year, especially in California. That's impossible, unless you're homeless. And even then, that's still stretching it, right? And so he said, I want this money to actually work for me. And so we got that money started to work for him in different places. He did a little bit of turnkeys, got in some syndications, did some oil and gas stuff. And by the end of it, he's now netting about $11,000 a month versus $2,500 a month that he has to pay taxes on, right? And that's the beauty of it. That's why I love shows like yours, Neil, because if we educate people to understand that this is not, even though this is outside the ordinary, just because it's not mainstream doesn't mean it doesn't work. Mainstream, for the most part, doesn't work. It's what you do that successful people do, which millions of us have done this kind of real estate investing already, and it's proven to work. So if you want to bet on odds, I like evidence. The evidence is there, is that you can actually do this. It doesn't mean it's risk-free. It doesn't mean that there aren't potential pitfalls that can happen, even in the real estate game, right? But I'm much more willing to bet on real assets than some arbitrary number that if Trump gets arrested or tweets something stupid or if Biden says something dumb again, it doesn't matter. My stocks aren't going to drop 3% in overnight. I'm not going to lose a bunch of my money. I don't worry about that stuff when it comes to real estate.
Yeah. What's interesting is, this be labeled, non-traditional, right? Alternative. The stock market as a whole at the end of 2022, I'm going off memory here, was about $23 trillion in value. Commercial real estate as a whole was about $20 trillion in value. Well, that labeled alternative, the commercial real estate, the alternative real estate class. Who came up with that? Wall Street came up with a branding methodology behind what was going to be, normal and what's alternative, but therefore, somehow scary. It just means that you can't go to a stockbroker and just invest in it like that, like you can a stock, where if they want more, they'll print more shares.
That's right. If you really look at financial companies, they've done an amazing job marketing to you.
No doubt.
All the financial education that everybody teaches, even like the Dave Ramseys and the Susie Ormans, right? They're all employed by these financial institutions. Doesn't matter if it's Fidelity, Merrill Lynch, Prudential, it doesn't matter whoever the company is, right? Goldman Sachs. They're all teaching the education that gets passed down to financial advisors that then pass it down to you. They're training those financial advisors to be salesmen in suits to then sell you on their crap. And you're right, like there's Wall Street, but what we talk about is Main Street. It's really like Main Street investing is what has been working for many, many, many years. And it's been proven to work. I just sent out an email to, recently to my list, and, we're talking about, really like this is an opportune time in the market right now, because when you hear people saying, again, listen to what the masses are saying. When the masses say run away, run towards it. When they say run towards something, run away. Always do the opposite, right? For example, just last year, everybody was talking about oh my goodness, the stock market's amazing. Everybody get in. I'm like, this is the time to get out, right? Bitcoin, same thing. I remember like beginning of 2022, I actually had some Bitcoin, even though I preached against it for the most part, but I was gambling, just playing with a little bit of money. When I started hearing that everybody and their dog, I mean, when you start hearing your old classmates that don't know anything about money asking about Bitcoin, that is the time to sell, right? Same thing in the stock market. Right now, nobody's saying that in the stock market yet. That means it hasn't hit the bottom yet. It's still got a ways to go.
Yep.
Real estate, though, I mean, Neil, how many times you heard people say, oh, maybe I should wait until the whole real estate thing gets better? How many times have you heard that now?
Oh, frequently.
Yeah, I hear it all the time, especially from average people.
Correct.
Well, if average people say it, do the opposite. That's how you become not average. Okay. And so that's why I'm still bullish. I'm still buying real estate. Now, am I cautiously optimistic? Absolutely. Am I willing to admit that there's probably going to be some value changes and things like that? Sure. Values can be definitely dropping in certain markets. But I'm not worried about that. I'm focusing again on what's going to actually pay good, consistent, predictable cash flow. And when you focus on that, you don't really worry about the values as much. You worry about, hey, is this thing going to pay me or not? If it's going to pay, awesome. Because the truth is people don't even know how to get the stock market to pay them, regular stable cash flow. They never have it.
Tell me, you mentioned a term, infinite banking. And so we're talking right now about methodology, what you can invest in. And through that, infinite banking is a vehicle that one can use to their advantage to invest. And I think there's some people, it can be a challenging concept to understand for a number of folks, just depending on how it gets explained and how it gets packaged. But maybe simplify, describe what it is, and then let's talk through an example how it might work for a passive investor, one who works a successful career, has a job, it's their primary source of income, and they definitely should not leave it until they can produce enough passive income to vacate their job, to become job optional. So I'd like to hear an example there. And then maybe for the active investor, somebody who sits in my shoes, a syndicator, an active real estate investor who does this, this is what we do.
So you pretty much just hit the two main segments of clients that I have. So there you go. Yeah. So infinite banking, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there on it. My version of infinite banking, the key is it has to be designed the right way. But infinite banking is essentially a supercharged tax-free savings account. That's really what it is. The vehicle it's using is whole life insurance. Now, this is not the usual whole life insurance that you buy from the State Farm agent down the street with that wears the too short tie and the belly sticking out. We're not talking about that person, right? What we're really referring to is using life insurance that it's a minimum death benefit, but allows you to put in the maximum cash allowed while still keeping it tax-free. The cool thing is it has the same tax treatment as a Roth IRA. You put in with after-tax dollars, grows tax-free, comes out tax-free. But you don't have all these stupid rules to go with it. There's no 59.5 rule that you have to worry about. You don't even have to worry about making too much money, too much income like Roth IRAs have. And everybody has to get sneaky doing their backdoor Roth IRAs and stuff. There's none of that. In fact, you can put in up to 25% of your stated gross annual income. So like I have a friend, and he's a client too. He's a syndicator. He's like, hey, my tax return shows I make $25,000 a year because I get so many amazing write-offs off of all the syndicated deals I'm doing that I show no income. Do I have to prove my income? I said, no, you don't. So what are we bringing in? About $1 million a year. Great. We put on our application $1 million a year. Cool. What does that mean I can put in, Chris? $250,000 a year is what you could put in as the max. The cool thing is you're not required to put in the max. There's a range, right? There's a limit. Usually the minimum on that plan, if you set the max at say $100,000 a year, the minimum is going to be about $20,000 to $25,000 a year. You put the max at $20,000 a year, the max may only be like $4,000 or $5,000 a year. So you can pick and choose however you want to set up the plan. Here's what's awesome about it though. So yes, you're using whole life, but whole life has guarantees. They're guaranteed to produce at least about a 3% return. That's if they don't pay a dividend. So you get this inflation hedge. Most of them are paying between 5 and 6% tax-free right now. If you even compare that to mutual funds, when you start factoring taxation, that's almost like the same return as mutual funds without all the risk, right? But here is the powerful thing. Whether you work a job or you're an active investor, here's what makes it amazing. I mean, one, yes, it's a great place to store money. I store about 75% of my emergency reserves inside my life insurance. Why? because in most states across the country, it's 100 protected from lawsuits and creditors, tax-free, and it pays me more than 0.nothing% like I get at the bank. And so I keep very little bank money. So when everybody's talking about bank failures, I don't even worry about that because most of my money is in life insurance companies, which are more protected than even the banks are. So I keep my money there. And so out of the $300,000 emergency fund that my wife wants me to keep, I keep $250,000 inside this bank, my own personal bank within my infinite banking policy. And then I keep the other $50,000 in local banks that I just have to get quick access to that day.
Now you keep it there inside the policy because you have access to it. It's not tied up.
That's right. I can access it usually within about a week is when I can get it. So that's why I still keep bank money, because if I don't want to wait a couple of days or a week or whatever to get my money from the insurance, at least I got some quick run on the bank type money I can use, right? Mm-hmm. So that's good to have. You still want to have bank money, but just don't have a lot of it. And lately, with all the crap that's going on, it's probably a good thing. You said
something. Let me comment on this, and then I want to let you go. You said something. It's safer than the bank, and I heard this the other day, and I absolutely loved it. It's safer than the bank, and I was having a conversation with somebody. They're like, I don't know if that's true. I said, mm-hmm. Do you know what the IC stands for in FDIC? It stands for insurance company.
Yeah.
Your bank is backstopped by an insurance policy. How in the world would a bank be somehow less risky when the backstop is the insurance company? Just skip the line and go to the insurance company.
Well, and that's the risk with banks. They can do what's called fractional reserve banking, right? They can loan out more money than what they have in actual assets from depositors and stuff like that. That's what we've been seeing, right? We've been seeing that issue. By the way, the FDIC, they have $236 billion in assets to protect your deposits, right? But Signature Bank, right, or even Silicon Valley Bank, we'll even take that as an example, had about $213 billion. So if Silicon Valley Bank didn't have all the assets to come back and back it up, that would have drained almost everything out of the FDIC with one bank failure. There's over 14,000 banks across the country, regional, nationwide, and otherwise. This is not over. Okay, we're going to see some issues.
Chris, I just wrote an article on this. The mandatory Dodd-Frank went into place in 2010ish. I'm rounding.
Yeah.
The mandate came down that there had to be 1.35% of all the deposits, covered deposits, insured deposits in this country. 1.35% of that had to be in the FDIC in reserves. So there's roughly 12 or 13 trillion dollars that happens to be insured. There's another 7 trillion. I'm rounding again. Uninsured deposits of SVB. 84% of their deposits were uninsured. Companies blow past $250,000, the backstop of the FDIC, in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah,
and so there is, roughly, you're saying 1/3 ish of all deposits on banks in this country are uninsured.
That's right, and that's the crazy thing is some people, like we just had recently, Warren Buffett came out, said banks are safe, nothing to worry about. But remember, during the last crisis, Bank of America went to him. He bought a big share. I think he owns 10% of Bank of America. Mm-hmm. So of course he's going to tell you, don't take your money out of the bank because he doesn't want to see his stocks plummet, right? He's a majority, or not a majority, but he's definitely a shareholder, right? He's a share owner big time in some of these banks. So, be careful who you listen to, right? Same thing. Insurance companies, the thing they also have too, they have what's called reinsurance. Mm-hmm. So they have insurance that backs them up. Insurance companies are global insurance companies that protect your cash value, the savings that's in there, and protect your death benefit to make sure that it stays solvent, even if the company doesn't. Just to give you an example, in the Great Depression, there's about 36,000 banks that were active in the 1920s. After the Great Depression, there were about 13,000 banks. So almost 2/3 of banks failed. 4 insurance companies failed during that period of time. That was it. So. When you look at it that way, statistically, it's way better. And of course, they can't do bank leverage. They can't do fractional reserve banking. They can't do any of that stuff inside a life insurance company. So, right. But anyways, that's one reason right there. But here's the other thing. Besides the fact that it's a great place to store money, and I would say this, if you're a real estate investor, active, and heck, even if you're a passive investor, you may want to keep some dry powder, right? You may want to keep some extra reserves, not just for emergencies, but even for opportunities coming up in this next year or two. Because I can guarantee, I know, Neil, you're going to find plenty of good deals.
Sure.
over these next few years, if you haven't been already starting to find them already right now. So having that extra dry powder is great. Here's how you can actually use it when you want to invest, because this is the part that got me excited as an investor, because I am an investor first and foremost. But the part that's awesome is that you can leverage the cash that's in these policies and get a line of credit against it, whether it be through a bank or through the insurance company directly. Why do they give you lines of credit? Because they know the money is guaranteed to never lose money. It's guaranteed to always grow, like I said, by at least 3%, even though they're usually paying on the low end 5 to 6% a year, right? So they're willing to loan you money at a very low interest rate, and then you can turn around and take that money and invest it. Now, this is better than using a savings account, because let's just say you have $200,000 in a savings account. You want to invest $100,000 into a syndication, right? So you pull out $100,000 out of your savings account. Your balance drops to $100,000. You're now only earning interest on that savings account of $100,000 but you got the other $100,000 at least working for you. In the life insurance, you keep all $200,000 in there. You get to borrow it. You borrow $100,000 from there. You still invest it. You still get paid all the returns. You get all the tax benefits from the real estate investment that you're doing. And you still have $200,000 earning compounding tax-free interest. What ends up happening is you end up double dipping. You make money in two places at the same time. So even if you made 10% on that passive investment, well, guess what? Now you have compounding money happening over here. Net, even after you factor in the interest costs and stuff, you still make at least another 1, 2, 3+% per year, depending on how long you're doing the strategy for. So you might go from like 10%, which you would normally do with using a savings account, to now making at least 11, 13+% gross total between the two. That just throws a lot.
Let me pin you down on that. You're saying that we've got money in the infinite banking in the policy. We can borrow that money from the, it's our money, but we can borrow it from the insurance company, go place that into any investment of our choice, no restrictions. And you're saying that because it's in a policy, it's in a cash policy, it's earning interest and dividends from the insurance company, that what we borrow it at from the insurance company is less than what it typically pays.
Yep. We
get to earn money against what we borrow and then employ it someplace else. You're right. We get a double dip there. Listen, my growing up, right? What did Dad always say? If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. So I want to know, what's the catch?
The catch is you got to make it work, right? I mean, so one catch would be is if you let the interest inside that policy compound against you. The great thing is when you borrow, right, and you really do get a line of credit against it, it is borrowing. Despite what some of these infinite banking people will say, they're like, oh, you just borrow your own money, you pay yourself back. That's bull. You don't pay yourself back. You actually pay a bank or insurance company interest. So if you never pay on the interest, because there's no monthly payment required. For active investors, this is big. Because if you're looking at doing a flip, for example, right, you're looking to get into a property, put some money down on it, you don't want to have a line of credit that you have to start paying monthly payments on before you ever get paid. Here, they'll charge interest, but you don't have any minimum monthly payments to make. They'll just charge you interest, almost like a student loan that's in deferral, right? Yeah, they'll charge you interest, but you have no payment on it. Same thing here with the life insurance. You can pay it back whenever, however you want. The balloon payment is due when you die. So that's the point where they just pay it with your death benefit, and then whatever the remaining of your death benefit goes to your family tax-free too. But that's essentially how it works. The key is, this is what I have people do, is when you get paid returns from your investment, take that money, pay down that line of credit, right? So you just cycle that money through. It's the same exact strategy you would have used if you pull money out of a savings account, throw it onto an investment, and then as you got paid your returns on the investment, putting it back in the savings account to build it up to then reinvest again, right?
Yep, right.
I mean, simple, that's what we've always done. Same exact strategy, just use your life insurance to do the same thing. Use that line of credit from life insurance, put in the investment. As the returns come, you pay it back towards that loan. That does a few things for you. One, it actually pays down that line of credit. As you pay it down, instead of compounding interest, you're only paying simple interest. The interest you're paying is becoming less and less and less, while the money inside your policy compounds more and more and more. It's that inverted curve, right? Yep. One has an exponential curve going this way. The other one, have you ever seen like loan interest, goes like this.
Yep.
So what happens, you're just taking the proceeds, the returns from the investment, and putting it back in. Even active investors, right? Say you're doing a flip on a property. Great. You take the money from the returns from that, pay off your loan. You keep all the profits. You can do whatever you want, reinvest it and do it again. You can pull money out again if you wanted to. Give you an example. I had one client where they actually did that. They did a flip. It took about a year. It took a little extra time. And she said, all right, I had $125,000 I borrowed for my policy. There's about $130,000 balance now because of the interest that was charged. She said, we made $155,000 on this flip. So do we just turn around and pay it off and then invest, or do we just invest? And I said, well, do you have an investment lined up? She said, yeah, we already have investment lined up. I said, great. If you want to keep the money from compounding, pay that $5,000 or $6,000 of interest off, and then still take the extra $20,000, $25,000 you had and just keep that money, just keep it out there invested again. So you still have $150,000 to invest the next time. So it's very flexible to be able to use however, whenever you want.
It's an interesting concept, and it requires connecting and with a proper service provider who knows a whole bunch about it to be able to properly use it, because there's a whole strategy behind it. That's
the other catch. Actually, it's funny because like there's a lot of people talk about infinite banking. I mean, you look online. I'm one of those people talk about it because we design these policies. But the one thing is, we know that we design them better than anybody, and we say that with 100% confidence. Because anytime somebody tries to compete, they have to break the policy to make it work, and then it becomes a taxable policy. It's not tax free anymore. But there was one situation where someone was pretty well known infinite banker, and I had some clients that were dentists, and they said, "Yeah, we're putting in about $150,000 a year between our few different policies that we have with this guy." And I said, "Well, I'll take a look. I mean, it's probably okay by this point because you've had it for like 6 years, so we may not want to mess with it, but sure, I'll take a look for you." We took a look, did an apples to apples comparison, saying, what if we did the same $150,000 doing my design versus what they already have done? And they already paid their dues, get granted, right? They had already gotten through the most expensive years of this policy. So it should be easily paying for itself at this point. Mm-hmm. Ran the numbers. After 20 years, apples put in the same amount of money. My policy came out $2.25 million better than the other guy's policy. And he was an infinite banker too, right? So he was trying to do this strategy, but he was just charging too much in insurance costs. And that's the thing that creates drag on it. You got to be so careful. And I'll tell you, even of the infinite bankers, 99% of them still charge you too much money on your policy. There's a few out there that I've run across saying, hey, they got the same numbers I got. They're great. You can go with them, do your thing with them. But I mean, it was just insane how much difference there was. And it was a no-brainer for them. They're like, I'm not costing myself $2.25 million over 20 years. Let's get this done.
Yeah, and that's because you properly designed it. The goal is not to juice up the tax, not to juice up the death benefit. It's to juice up the dollars and cents as you grow this policy.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And even when people try to juice up the death benefit, right, they'll still do things where, depending on how they design it, it could still end up taking more money out of your pocket. So you really do have to be careful. I was watching a video. A friend of mine, so I'm not going to disclose his name, but I actually did a React video for it too, because I'm like, this guy's a good guy. But when he's saying like, their first year, you dump in, say, $50,000, you only have about $30,000 in there from day one.
Right.
Where mine, you have about $40,000 in there. And he'll tell you, it's like, oh, it's the best design. It's the way it should be. It's the lowest death benefit. No, it's not. That's not the best design, because $10,000 costs you too dang much. That's $10,000 more that goes in their pockets versus yours. So you got to be very careful about those. You want to make sure you get a really well-designed policy that not just saves you more in the first year, but even as the policy goes on, it doesn't, pay the agent more and just deceive you. There's some of those 90-10 policies, they call them out there, where 90% of your cash goes in. So if you put in $50,000, you'd have 45 in there. Mm-hmm. I actually can offer those policies too. But the reason I don't do it is because I already know it'll cost you more than those next couple of years. They just spread out the cost more, right? Mm. So everything about those policies about design is all about cost. How do you minimize those costs, allowing your cash value, your savings, your tax-free savings to grow unencumbered as much as possible?
Yeah, that, and there's only certain insurance companies that can even do this. But the majority,
that's correct.
The overwhelming majority wouldn't even line up.
Oh yeah, like I've had so many people like from like New York Life or Northwestern Mutual approach me saying, "Hey, we would love you to work with our company." I'm like, "Yeah, but you have nothing. You have nothing competitive. Like you have nothing that would give you an edge over any of these other companies that are doing great." Yeah, but we're really big. Yeah, that's because you charge too much. That's why you're so big. That's why you're so profitable. You just rip people off. Now granted, New York Life's pretty good. They're not as bad, but whenever I hear somebody say they got a Northwestern Mutual policy, I'm like, all right, this thing's going to suck. I'm sorry to tell you this, but it sucks. It's just the way it is. And so the problem is, like, every Northwestern Mutual agent will say, yeah, but we're the best. We're the biggest. That's because you've been ripping people off for decades. Congratulations. Way to go.
Tell me, what are you most excited about this year in 2023, looking forward?
I'm super excited just about the fact that people are scared. Because whenever people are scared, it just means we have more buying opportunity, right? We have better opportunity when people run away. And so I see that being the case. I'm looking at things like, I am looking more into like commercial real estate space more, because I know commercial real estate was like way overvalued, especially in 2022. It was getting really hard to find any good deals. But I'm seeing more and more happening right now. I think even like on the real estate rental side, I think you're going to start seeing some improvements there, where rents will start to catch up now that we've seen mortgage rates settle. The funny thing is, the Fed rate, I still expect to keep going up for a little while longer. I think it'd go up at least another 0.5%. But when it comes to mortgage rates, they're settling, right? They're starting to be at a really good place right now. Great time to lock in long-term debt and things like that, and just try to create profit. So I see the opportunity in the sense that if you have cash available, you have that dry powder, like I talked about earlier, you're going to be able to, I wouldn't say walk on water, but pretty dang close, right? You're going to be able to really have opportunities that most won't, because the problem in 2022, and this is when I knew it was a problem. Remember, I talked about do the opposite. In 2022, the thing everybody said is, I've got cash sitting in a bank. I got to get out of here. I cannot lose to inflation. I got to get out. Everybody just deployed all their capital and it was gone. So they had no more cash left. I guarantee you're going to see more people stuck in certain projects, with their money locked up, or money depleting or lost, depending on who they trusted, right? They're going to start losing money, and then everybody's going to be begging for cash. If you have cash, you will be king or queen of this market.
Let's do this. I want to move on to the final segment, what I call the final four.
Yeah.
What do you think holds most passive investors back from hitting their personal next level, whatever that happens to be?
Oh, it's emotions, 100%. It's mindset and emotions. I'm seeing right now a trend that a lot of investors are sitting around waiting for the right opportunity, right? They don't want to do anything. They're just sitting around with cash inside. And remember, I said cash is good, but remember also, I'm still investing. So it doesn't mean I'm investing and deploying every penny I have, right? I'm not going overly bullish. I'm keeping some money aside for opportunities to spread it out a little bit more, but I'm still investing. I'm still trying to get my money out of prison, keep it in my control. I think that's the biggest thing that people are running into right now, is that I'm seeing people that are kind of scared, and they're going to be missing out on some of the best opportunities right now. They're going to miss out on the very thing that got Joseph Kennedy, right? John F. Kennedy's dad, that got him from $4 million of net worth in 1929 to all of a sudden over $180 million net worth by 1935. 6 years from 4 million to 180 million. It was times just like right now when people start getting worried. Remember, 1929 wasn't a bad year. It wasn't until really 1931 you started to really see the depression hurt, right? I see the same thing. I don't know if it's going to be depression, but I can tell you that there are opportunities now for you to grow your wealth that you probably may not see again for a decade or two at least.
Outside of real estate and anti-financial planning, how about that? What are you most passionate about?
Besides just the teaching and stuff, I'm really passionate about just, my company's name is Money Ripples, right? The reason it's called that is because I believe that each of us have like these God-given gifts, talents, abilities, experiences, background, everything that we can share to bless more people's lives. I'm super excited because I want people free. I want them to break the shackles that keeps them in bondage, that keeps them working their 9-to-5 job. It doesn't mean you have to quit your job, but at least become in a place where you're work optional. You stop focusing on yourself, being so selfish, and look around you to see whose lives you can better. That's really the ripple effect we're trying to create with Money Ripples, is help you create a ripple effect too. So that's the thing that really excites me. That's the thing that keeps me going, even though I don't need this business. I don't need the money. I really just want to help more people because I believe that I've been placed on this earth for a reason, and I better dang well use the time that I've been given to use it.
Your favorite book?
Favorite book, other than scriptures, I'll keep that out, of course. But talking about personal development book. I mean, one of my favorites is actually, I'm split between a couple of them. I was going to say Atlas Shrugged, but that's a good one. But I'm going to say probably my favorite book is actually How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think that's kind of it's the very first self-help book that I read. And still to this day, it blows my mind how important that is for anybody, no matter what walk of life you're in. It really is about people. And the real key to making more money is always, how do you go about serving people and solving problems? And the better you get at problem solving and serving people, the more prosperous you become, not just financially, but in all areas of your life.
Your favorite way to make an impact on the community?
I'll just add this. I mean, that's why I have my podcast, the Money Ripples podcast. I mean, I love doing podcasts like this, right? Because I love being able to get that message out. I love being able to help really re-educate people in a way that I know works, because I don't want them to fall victim and become like my dad, who's now 78, almost 79 years old, just trying to stretch out every dollar he could possibly do because he did it the Dave Ramsey crappy financial advisor way. And I don't want people to be in that. And so that's the ripple effect. And that's the impact I want to make, is really to free people, to liberate them.
We launched the Maverick Vault here this year. It's a collection of resources available to our listeners. I understand you're making a contribution to the vault with your ebook. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, I have an ebook called Beyond Rice and Beans, 7 Secrets to Free Up Cash Today. It's interesting because when I went through my hardest financial times, I was over $1 million in debt. At one point, 16,000 in the hole each month I was short. I had to get really resourceful. I had no money, no credit. I had to get my money. I had to find money that I didn't even know was there. And so during that period of time, I got really resourceful, was able to dig out of that hole, and still became financially independent less than a decade later, for the second time, just so you know. And so that book has like the 7 top ways to be able to find and free up cash to get creative. So that's what we're going to be putting in the vault there.
No, we appreciate that contribution. You guys can get it at www.themaverickvault.com. Chris, this is wonderful. I appreciate you being on here. You're a wealth of knowledge, and it's cool to hear some what you don't hear, right? And the kind of, I use that, the non-traditional. And I'd rather categorize it, really the secrets that the wealthy do. And it just doesn't run in the mainstream. So for people, they want to find you, they want to follow you, they want to connect with you, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, I mentioned the Money Ripples podcast you can find on iTunes or YouTube, but you can also just go to moneyripples.com. We got lots of education, lots of things you can find there.
Links will be below in the show notes for everybody. Chris, I appreciate the time.
Hey, it's such a pleasure to be here, Neil. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you. To our listeners, pat yourself on the back. You guys have made it to the end of the show, and most people never finish what they start. If you receive value from today's show, be sure to share it on LinkedIn, your Facebook page, or your social media platform of choice. Subscribe to never miss a valuable episode in the future. And if you found value in today's episode, give us a thumbs up with a positive review. If there's a particular topic you'd like to hear about, well, I want to hear from you. Shoot me a message on LinkedIn. The link to my profile is below in the show notes. You can connect with me there for more valuable content.